Fear. It's everyone's literally least favorite word. I think, when we think about fear, we think about being held back and being frozen and not being able to move forward. Well, what if we were to reframe that and we use fear as fuel for motivation to get stuff done in our businesses and to propel us into doing things that we never thought we could accomplish? In fact, I remember when I used to teach yoga, I would say fake it till you make it to my students when they were trying to do advanced arm balances, because they were so afraid of falling on their face or hurting themselves that they would sometimes never try it. But I guarantee you that the ones who kept pushing forward and just like faking the pose until they made it were the ones that ended up nailing it someday. And so here's what we're going to do. Today we're going to be talking with Ruth Soukup, the author of Do It Scared, and we're going to be talking about how to use fear and your fear archetype to succeed in business and life. I'm so excited about this. I'm Tracy Matthews. I'm the Chief Visionary Officer over here at Flourish and Thrive Academy, and I help jewelry brands and independent fashion and accessories brands launch, grow, and scale their business and add, consistent sales and revenue to their online business. So, Ruth, welcome to the show today. And tell me, first and foremost, I think I'm really curious. I know everyone's curious. Why fear, and why did you choose this angle for your book?
It was really because I noticed that it was a topic that kept coming up over and over again. You probably see it too. I have so many women in my community, both at Living Well, Spending Less with the Living Well Planner, where I talk about goal setting and going after your big goals and dreams. And then at Elite Blog Academy, where again, I talk about starting a business and how to get it going. And in both places, over and over, it was women coming to me and saying, you talk about going after your goals and dreams, and I feel so stuck. I feel like I'm sitting on the sidelines. I don't dare to jump in. Something is holding me back, and I don't know what it is. And it just got me so curious because it felt like it was such a common theme. And it made me really wonder, what is this fear that's holding us back? Does it look the same for everyone? And more importantly, what can we do about it? So that's where I started asking questions and ended up discovering some stuff that was pretty cool. We ended up doing a study of over 4,000 people. Wow. It was so much data that we had to hire a whole team of researchers to help go through it. But then we ended up developing, as you mentioned, these fear archetypes, because what we realized is that not all fear is created equal. It actually, the way it manifests itself for different people looks very different, except we experience it as truth. We don't realize it's different for everyone. And often we don't even realize that what's happening is fear, because sometimes we don't call it fear. Sometimes we call it being stuck. Sometimes we call it anxiety. Sometimes we call it just feeling overwhelmed. But really what's happening is this subconscious fear is happening. But when you can identify it and actually see how this is playing out in your life, that's when you can start to do something about it.
That's so awesome. So I read the book, and I also took the test, the archetype quiz, because I had to find out what I was. And I was kind of surprised that I came out almost pretty even on a lot of them. But my number one archetype is the outcast. The second one is the people pleaser, and the third one is the rule follower, which I was surprised because I don't know that most people looking at me would think I was a people pleaser, but potentially, I don't know. I guess I really care about people and I'm a social person.
Yeah.
But also the rule follower, I feel like I'm breaking rules all the time, but it's interesting to see how these kind of play out. So tell us a little bit about the 7 fear archetypes.
Yeah. So it's important to know that each of the 7 archetypes are on a continuum. And we all have probably a little bit of every single one within us. But the way that there's usually 1 or 2, sometimes even for some people, it's 3 or 4 that are most prevalent and probably most strongly affecting your life. And also it depends on how high you score. So there are some people that score in the 95th percentile for some of them versus somebody who might score in the 40th percentile for their top one, in which case I think that was more you were lower on all of them. And that means that fear is probably not impacting your life as strongly as somebody who scores in the 95th percentile.
Yeah, so that's cool, because you told me right before, you're like, well, fear probably doesn't play as much of a role in, your daily decision-making process, because everything was kind of in the 40s-ish or in lower percentages. So that's really interesting to know. But you said like when the percentages are higher, it can really be the paralyzing factor, right?
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, I've seen it with people in our community. We've had over 30,000 people take the assessment now. And I've seen people score like in the 90 percentile for 6 out of the 7 archetypes. So
really?
you can tell, yeah. And they talk about it like, oh my gosh, this is totally me. Fear is holding me back in everything that I do. So it really, there's a huge spectrum of and a huge range of how it's playing out for people's lives. So, but finding out where it's most affecting you, I think is the perfect jumping off place. And so the stronger that you score in one particular archetype, the more likely it is that characteristics of that archetype are affecting your life and holding you back in some way. And so I can run through them really quickly.
Run through them.
Archetypes.
I want to get people to actually take the test because
you should definitely take the assessment. It's actually, we have the free version of the assessment. You can take it. It will give you your top archetype, or there's a premium version of the assessment that you can take, and it'll give you your overall score, your percentage on all of them, and your top 3, and then how those top 3 work together. And so it's really valuable. And we actually have a book bonus right now. So if you purchase the book, then you can get the premium assessment for free. So yeah, the 7 archetypes, the procrastinator is the first one. The procrastinator is another word for perfectionist. So a lot of times people will accept that they might be a perfectionist, but they don't really tie it to procrastination or the fact that they tend to overplan everything or will put stuff off because they feel like it's never quite good enough. But the underlying fear there is the fear of making a mistake. Mm-hmm. And so that's the fear, that tends to be the fear for the procrastinator that holds you back. The second one is, as you mentioned, the rule follower archetype. For the rule follower, it's almost this underlying fear of stepping outside the lines or of not doing things in the right order, because there's always got to be an order for everything. And sometimes rule followers will have almost this like sense that somebody somewhere is going to crack down if you haven't like dotted all your I's or crossed all your T's, or the rule follower can be the person who always follows the instructions step by step, no matter what. So the third one is the people pleaser archetype. And the people pleaser, the underlying fear there is the fear of being judged or a fear of what other people will think. And so a good way to kind of differentiate between, say, the procrastinator and the people pleaser is that the procrastinator fears making the mistake, does not want to make a mistake, whereas the people pleaser also does not want to make a mistake, but is more afraid of what people would say if they made a mistake. They're more afraid of the judgment versus making the mistake itself.
Look like a fool or something like that.
Yeah. Do not want to look like a fool. So people pleasers can be overly concerned with, the way they dress, the way their outside appearances. They can do a lot of keeping up with the Joneses, trying to keep up wearing status symbols, not always, but sometimes. Or people pleasers can be the life of the party. They're the ones who are always concerned about how everybody else is doing. People pleasers are usually great people to be around because they're a lot of fun. And they're also like super like nice people a lot of times. The next one is the outcast. So that was your top one. That
was my top one.
It's
awesome.
Actually, it's the 4th most common overall, but it's the most common for entrepreneurs.
Oh, really?
Enough. Yeah. And the outcast is basically, the underlying fear there is a fear of rejection. And so it's actually the most ironic of all the 7 archetypes, because on the surface,
all the time.
on the surface, you can like appear to be fearless, because outcasts almost have this ability to reject people before they get rejected in return. So it's you on the outside, you project this sort of, I don't need the world. I'm going to go out and prove myself. I don't need anybody. But inside it's because there's this like a deep fear of rejection. So it can either help you be really successful, or it can cause you to be like a delinquent.
One of the two. Which one of the two. Of both, right?
Yeah, exactly. The 5th one is the self-doubter. And the underlying fear for the self-doubter is a fear of not being capable or not being enough. So the self-doubter struggles with a lot of insecurity. And the way that often plays out for the self-doubter is through a lot of hypercriticism, either towards themselves, which usually tends to happen, but not always in front of other people. They're hypercritical privately, but publicly they'll be hypercritical of other people. And so if you know anybody that tends to be like so critical of everybody all the time, or like of you all the time, maybe somebody in your life
specifically.
Yes. Yeah. So probably a self-doubter, and it can maybe help you have more empathy for that person, because instead of realizing that they're not being a jerk, it's more coming from a place of fear.
Yeah. Interesting.
It can really help with your relationships from that standpoint.
My gosh. Yeah, let's go through the last two.
Yeah, the last two. So the last one, or the second to the last one, is the excuse maker, which is a fear of being blamed or a fear of taking responsibility. And then the final one is the pessimist, which is a fear of pain or adversity. And that usually comes from a place of having experienced a lot of pain or adversity, either hardship or trauma. And it sort of gets that person, the pessimist, stuck in a place where they feel like, why should I even bother?
And the excuse maker, what's the underlying fear there?
The underlying fear there is a fear of taking responsibility or a fear of being blamed or being like held down. And so the excuse maker is usually the one who you can never seem to like quite pin down. They always have an excuse for everything, and they're masterful rationalizers. They are always able to come up with some reason for why something was not their fault or their responsibility.
I love it. So I want you guys, you must get this book. It is so good. It's called Do It Scared. You can go pick it up over at doitscared.com. You can go take the assessment, find out what your I want to call it fear factor. Wasn't that
fear archetype?
Your fear archetype is, it's going to be really helpful for you. I read through it, and it made so much sense, like how I approach my business and everything else. And it really shed some light on, how I was approaching different projects or even my team and leadership. And I think it will actually like really enlighten you. And I think the best part about it is we just talked about like the first quarter of the book. The rest of it is like how to deal with those archetypes and how to kind of move through the things that are keeping you stuck. So head on over to doitscared.com, pick up your book today. And if you like this, Ruth, where can people find you on social?
I'm at Ruth Soukup on Instagram. So that's probably the best place to find me.
Awesome. Thanks for being here today, Ruth.
Thank you.